Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Couple of Nukes. As always, I'm your host, Mr. Whiskey, and today we're going to be giving some advice to help you get to the next level. And what's great about the next level is that's different for everyone. That has a different meaning for wherever you are in your life, but it's still a level up from where you are. And some of us, sometimes in life, we try going too many levels at once. We burn out, we just stretch ourselves thin. So today we're going to be talking about one level at a time, how to level up, what that'll encompass for each individual, and just some great universal, timeless advice for doing that. We are here with a man who has not only leveled up himself many times, but runs an entire program for many years through a variety of different mediums to help other people level up, whether it's business or personal. And so, Mr. Lazarus, would you please go ahead and introduce yourself for us?
Yes, so first and foremost, gratitude always. I'm a big proponent of courageous, massive, messy action. I actually spilt my drink right at the beginning of that introduction, and I currently have some of my drink dripping onto my jeans, but I don't even care because we're here and we're going to make it happen.
Right.
So thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And I think that that's a good lesson right out of the gate, which is things don't always go perfectly, but if you can still power through and get it done, a lot of good things can happen. As for speaking of things not going perfectly, my story I'm going to try to condense. I'm going to be 36 in November, and I'm a numbers thinker, so I always provide that for context. The first thing to understand before I tell this story is that I didn't understand this at the time.
Right.
And I've since sort of rewatched the movie of my own life over and over and over and over and over again. And when I was your age, I was the Alan 2.2 version of myself.
Right.
Now I'm about to be the Alan 3.6 version. And every single iteration, I learn more and more and more about myself, more and more and more about other people, more and more about the world. And I feel like I understand it all more. So two things before I tell the story. Number one, didn't understand this at the time, even though it will sound like I did. And then number two is when you watch a movie when you're a kid and then you watch it again as an adult, you kind of get it at a deeper level. And I think that all of us should be doing that with our own lives. I started doing therapy in my 30s and I really started rewatching the movie of my own life, and it really helped me understand it at a deeper level. So this is my current 3.5. I'm 35 years old, 3.5-year-old version. And I'll try to give you the short version. I'm going to try to condense 35 years into, 5
Right.
or 10 minutes here. Okay, so first and foremost, I was born in Massachusetts, and I still live in Massachusetts now, actually. And when I was born, I was 2.5 years old, almost 3, and my father passed away in a car accident when he was 28. My real last name is actually McCorkle, and my stepfather's last name is Lazarus. So my stepfather is Steve Lazarus. My birth father, his name is John McCorkle. He was part of a big Irish Catholic family. It was Jim, Joe, John, Jane, Joan, Jeanette. 6 kids, all with the name letter J at the beginning. And so when my father passed away in a car accident when he was 28, my mom was 31, my sister was 6. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and so the primary breadwinner, for lack of better phrasing, was my father. And so when my stepdad came into the picture from age 3 to 14, he left my family at 14. And I playfully refer to 3 to 14 as boats and BS. The reason why is because, first of all, this was the mid to late 90s, early 2000s, so that the dot-com bubble was happening, and in the US, but globally, the economy was just absolutely booming in the 90s. And my mom and stepdad, so my stepfather worked for a company called AGFA, AGFA, and they did hospital computers. So he did very, very well. And so we had boats and ski trips, and we had snowmobiles, and my mom drove a BMW, and he had a motorcycle, and it was boats and BS is what I playfully refer to this, because my mom and stepdad just loved to have as much fun as possible. And so they surrounded themselves with other people who wanted to have as much fun as possible. And so there's my childhood. We did a lot. So he leaves at 14, takes his entire extended family with him. To this day, I've not seen a single one of them. Not one. I have talked to my stepdad on Facebook Messenger a little bit. That same year, 14 was the hardest year of my life. Didn't know this at the time. I definitely understand this now. I was a freshman in high school. He leaves, takes his entire extended family with him. He gets the yacht and the apartment building. We get the house and the dog. And I go from Xbox, Dreamcast, boats, and ski trips to now I get free lunch at school because our income is so low. And I'm shopping at thrift stores, and my mom trades in her BMW for a little Honda Civic. And we weren't going to starve by any means, but I was definitely a broke high school and college student for sure. So I went from, I can't wait to go to my dream college. My dream was to be an engineer, and I wanted to go to WPI, Worcester Polytechnic Institute. It's like a mini MIT in Massachusetts, and it was $50,000 a year, and this is back then. And so I went from I hope I get in to even if I do get in, it's a top engineering school, I'm not going to be able to go. So that same year, 14, sister moves out with her older boyfriend. That same year, my mom gets in a fight with my Aunt Sandy, her sister. My Aunt Sandy ostracizes us from that side of the family. And we don't really associate with the McCorkles very much anymore because we were the Lazaroses. Right. So I kind of lost 3 families by the time I'm 14.
Wow.
Whoa. And so it's just me and my mom. And so we've since reconnected with the McCorkles, and that's been really good. But at 14, this wasn't conscious. This was unconscious. But looked at my past, painful. Mom and stepdad definitely didn't get along, and that's a polite way to put it on a public medium. I look at the past, it's painful. Look at the present, it's painful. I remember people saying, these are the best years of your life. High school, these are the best years of your life. I remember thinking, God, I hope not.
Yeah.
Because this is terrible. And by the way, they were very wrong about that. I think those were the best years of their life.
Right.
But
right.
Fast forward into the future, I'm sitting there thinking, okay, so there's no dad, there's no trust fund, there's no one's going to come and save me. So if it's going to be up to me. And so I kind of became the man of the house, quote unquote, at 14. There's 4 trauma responses. There's fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Most people know fight and flight. Freeze is sort of disassociate. Fawn is you become a social coward. You just appease. You appease, you fit in, contort yourself to belong. Just don't poke the bear. And so I became this sort of social coward who was this sort of esoteric, mathematical, engineering thinker who socially just wanted to fit in and belong because obviously I had lost so many people that I love. But behind the scenes when no one was watching, it was fight. It was aim higher, work harder, get smarter. Aim higher, work harder, get smarter. Aim higher, work harder, get smarter. The amount of drive that I have is ridiculous. It's honestly ridiculous. So when I started doing therapy in my 30s, I thought that I was going to lose my drive. I was like, am I going to get soft? Is this... And it ended up being even more. It's way more now. So anyways, so 14, I got straight A's through all of high school. I got what's behind me. It's called the President's Award. It's signed by George W. Bush. And essentially you get straight A's for every report card, 16 report cards straight, all 4 years of high school. So I was able to get tons of scholarships, tons of financial aid. I got a bunch of awards, which are actually behind me, and not all of them, but some of them are behind me. And I got in to WPI, and I was able to go. It's $50,000 a year, but I got enough scholarships and financial aid to actually go, academic-based. And so I went. I got my computer engineering degree from one of the best engineering colleges in the world. And I got my master's in business, and I was off to the races. 21st century, computer engineer. I mean, let's rock and roll. So I went from a broke high school and college student to, whoa, I'm very sought after now. So I went from 65 a year to 85, from 85 a year to 125, from 125 per year to 180. And I just kept climbing very, very quickly. I worked for a bunch of different tech companies. So iRobots, Sensata Technologies, Tyco Safety Products, Lens Americas, a little company called Oz Development. I lived in LA for a time. And I did some soul searching and job hopping. And to me, it was let me build wealth, because when my stepdad left, the lack of wealth seemed to cause pain. So to me, the answer was wealth, become wealthy. And I had 2 paths in life that I wanted to choose. It was going to be lawyer, politician, president, or it was going to be engineer, MBA, CEO of a tech company like my hero, Steve Jobs. And I had a bunch of other little dreams, pro gamer, all this snowboarder, all these things, but those were the main actual career paths. And so I obviously went the engineer, MBA, Fortune 500 tech company. That was my goal. to be the CEO of a Fortune 500 tech company. Like my hero at the time, Steve Jobs. I used to argue who's smarter, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, that kind of thing. I realize now I'm an esoteric weirdo, by the way. I didn't understand that as a kid, but now I'm definitely on the statistical far end of the bell curve in terms of crazy self-belief weirdo-ness. But anyways, so I started making a lot of money. Like I said, I got almost $200,000 a year. I got to that point. I'm in my early 20s. I'm dating a woman named Courtney. We live on a lake. My rent is $500. I don't have any kids. I bought a 2004 Volkswagen Passat for $5,000 cash because I was so used to going without that I didn't need much.
Right.
So I paid off 84 grand worth of college debt in a single year, which I now realize is wild. But for me, that was my goal, just get out of debt. And then fast forward, I have $150,000 in a Vanguard account, all different tech companies and ETFs, index funds. And I'm in corporate. I work for a company called Cognex at this point. I started an inside sales engineering team, and then I got promoted to outside sales engineering. My territory was, so they sell industrial automation equipment all across the world. Machine vision, kind of the eyes of robotics. Picture a manufacturing facility with water bottles going down a line and make sure the cap is on right on every one and take pictures of everyone and that kind of thing. And so I did very, very well. And at that point, I'm very successful externally. I'm very improvement oriented. I'm very achievement oriented. And I was definitely on my way to my dream. And then I get in my car accident. So I'm 26 at this point. This is back in 2015, which is almost 10 years ago now. And I'm in New Hampshire with so the only person who came back from my mom's side to this day, his name is Jeff, my cousin Jeff, and his son, Dan, is my second cousin, was in the car with me. So I'm playing Call of Duty with Dan. We go to TGI Fridays. This is back in 2015. And I look down at the GPS, I look up, and I'm on the wrong side of the road. So it was a dark winter night. It was a three-way intersection. The snowbanks were covering the yield signs. And I was supposed to yield, and I didn't. My fault. I end up on the wrong side of the road. I look up, and I see what I thought was a Mack truck in front of me. Big bright lights right in front of me. And I think, this is the end, for sure. There's no way. There's no way we survive this. My computer engineering brain just calculated that very quickly. Two things saved my life. One, it wasn't a Mack truck. It was a lift-kitted pickup truck. Number two, I drove a 2004 Volkswagen Passat, and I used to call this car the Tank because it was a German-engineered steel trap of a car. It was a heavy car. I used to call it the Tank, and the Tank totally saved my life. I've actually since found out that's one of the safest cars ever. And so the front end was completely crushed. I mean, this was no fender bender. This was a head-on collision. This was bad.
Right.
But the frame stayed. Both airbags deployed. My cousin and I are physically fine. He hurt his knee on the airbag. I hurt my face on the airbag. We're definitely rattled, but physically we're okay. But remember, my dad died in a car crash when he was 28. So I'm 26 at the time. This is the second chance my dad never got. And so while my little cousin Dan is already tweeting about it, sort of invincible 17-year-old, I'm completely shattered, just mentally, emotionally, and spiritually rattled beyond what I've ever experienced since. It was just, holy crap. That very much could have been it. Because I think a lot of people have an intellectual understanding of death. When my dad died, I've never had just an intellectual understanding of mortality. It's always been an emotional one. It's always been something that my family has experienced. And I've grew up my whole life hearing stories about John, my dad. And
right.
So for me, almost dying at 26 was the ultimate wake-up call. And this was the second chance my dad never got. So now this is obvious, and there was post-traumatic growth for sure, but there was also, I was claustrophobic. Double yellow lines scared me for a while. It was hard to get back in the car. I used to have to puff my chest up and walk in and out of doors because of my claustrophobia. So I dealt with some challenges for sure, PTSD stuff from the car accident. However, there was tons of post-traumatic growth. After that car accident, I found self-improvement. I found a Tony Robbins TED Talk, still the best TED Talk ever done in my opinion, and regardless of what you think of Tony. And there was a book by Bronnie Ware called "The Top Five Regrets of the Dying." I actually still have flashcards here they're all tattered. I used to carry them around in my pocket everywhere. But one of
Wow.
them is "The Top Five Regrets of the Dying." It says 2018 on it actually. Uh, but anyways, so I carry these around because that book. There's a woman named Bronnie Ware. I've interviewed her, Bronnie Ware from Australia. She wrote a book called "The Top Five Regrets of the Dying." She worked with the terminally ill for 8 years in hospice. And she saw these same regrets over and over and over again. I wish, I wish, I wish. The number one regret of the dying is I wish I had lived a life true to myself and not what others expected of me. And there's a couple others on there too. I wish I had the courage to express my true feelings. That's another big one. But I realized I had so many regrets. So many. And I don't even think I made poor choices compared to most people. I just think that if all of us were to really face mortality, I think we'd all have a lot of regret. I had, before 26, before my car accident, I was achievement oriented, I was improvement oriented. I had tons of friends, high school friends and college friends and corporate friends, and my life was full of a lot of nonsense, to be completely honest. And I used to be too much of a coward to say that.
Mm.
After 26, I found self improvement. So instead of external achievement at the expense of internal fulfillment, it became flip the script. Internal
Right.
fulfillment and external success will come. Well, it turns out that doesn't work either because I went past broke, liquidated all my assets, started my own company, and I was super fulfilled, happy, healthy, productive, fitness model, fitness competitor, fitness coach. I went all in on fitness. I became this super internally fulfilled, well rounded, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually developed man who was actually proud of himself, really actually reaching my true potential for the first time, but yet I went broke. And so these are the four buckets that I now teach. The first one is we're unfulfilled and unsuccessful. When I was 14, I was unfulfilled and unsuccessful. I was a cart kid and a busboy at 16, and I was not doing well externally, and I certainly wasn't fulfilled internally. And I think that's where we all start. The second bucket is you are successful externally, but deeply unfulfilled internally. And a lot of people are there. That's where I was before 26. The third bucket is you understand yourself, you learn yourself, you are internally fulfilled, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually developed, and you're reaching your potential, but you're not successful externally. And then the fourth bucket is what it took me 30 years to get to. More than 30 years, honestly, probably 32 years. Because I'm going to be 36. It was about 3 years ago where I really felt like I got there. Now, here's the thing. When you can look in the mirror and authentically say, I want my future to be an amplified version of what it already is, that means you got to the fourth bucket. That's what everyone wants. And I'm not just saying this. I coach 25 individuals currently. I've coached hundreds over the years. I've been mentoring for 10 years, coaching for 7, and thousands and thousands and thousands of hours. I just got off a coaching session right before this with a woman named Christy from Canada. Regardless of your background, your country, there is those four buckets, and you're in one of them. And everyone, and I mean everyone, wants to get to that fourth bucket, which is I want my future to be an amplified version of what it already is. I am both externally successful and internally fulfilled, and I want this to be the metaphorical mountain that gets higher as I climb it. And that's the infinite game we're all playing, but a lot of us get stuck in those first three buckets, and we don't know how to proceed.
Yeah. What you said that I was thinking about a lot was the story that you're telling us now. There's a lot of realizations that weren't until recent. And when I was writing my memoir in my faith-based book, I actually wrote it with a precursor that there's so much in my life that sounds like obvious, like you should have known this or you should have known that, or if you knew this, why didn't you do that? And I said, this book is very reminiscent of Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut, if I'm saying that right. For anyone who hasn't read it, it's a crazy book. And the alien species in it, they see the past, present, and future all at once. And the guy, the main character, experiences that. And so he tells the story, past, present, all future, all each chapter is like just a random spot in time. And so stuff that he didn't know at that time. And when we look back at our lives and we're telling other people our stories, that's how it is. because like you said, there is stuff that you're realizing now, like this is what that actually was. And the example I use in my life is gaslighting, narcissism, manipulation, right? Because there's so much of that that you don't see as you're growing up, that you don't realize, especially like from my example, as I discussed in a previous episode on conformity, was that I didn't even know or have the ability to think about thinking independently. And so when you're not, it's so easy for people to say, hey, why didn't you just do this or that? I look back at my life, I'm like, why didn't I just do that or that? I'm like, I would if I have the knowledge I had now, but we didn't. And that's why I think it's so important to have people like you, Mr. Lazarus, and people like myself and all the great guests that we've both had sharing this information and knowledge so that the younger people can get it before they have their near fatal accident. Like you said, it took you almost losing your life to have that realization. And maybe everyone does need a death, near death experience, but realistically, I think if if our information can get through without that, then you can realize. And what I really liked at the end there, you talk about our future just being what we're doing now, but better. But so many people are chasing a future that is completely different from what they're doing now. And so it becomes a question of, well, which life is the lie of unhappiness, what I'm living now or what I'm chasing after? So I think it's good to realize that you talk about that fourth bucket. And so you talk about you had that self-improvement, that post-traumatic growth and all of that. At what point did this lead to the creation of Next Level University, and how did that you just go from starting your own business to now you're coaching people, you're working with people left and right. You've had thousands of episodes. How did that all fall into place?
Yeah, the first thing is conversations like this is I'm so grateful to have them, and I'm so grateful they're out in the world for people, because ultimately getting people thinking about their life in a different way is what can break things free. Unfortunately, in order to listen to a conversation like this, you have to have a lot of humility.
Right.
And the car accident for me, I think there's three circles. I call them the three circles of the ego. The outer layer is who you want others to believe you are. That's
Yeah.
perception. The next layer in is who you want to believe you are. And then the inner layer is who you really are.
Mm.
And the car accident collapsed all three of those circles into just one circle, where everything I wanted others to believe about me, everything I wanted to believe about me came crashing down. And that's sort of the phoenix burned down, rise anew from the ashes metaphor. And I've worked really hard. My new goal in life is to keep those three circles the same. Who I want others to believe I am, who I want to believe I am, and who I really am. I want to make sure those circles stay the same. I think some people are inflating and they think they're way
Right.
better than they really are, and other people are deflating and pretending they're not great when they actually are amazing because they're cowards. And that was me too,
Mm.
by the way. But ultimately, the problem with why mortality feels necessary to have these breakthroughs is because mortality humbles us to the core. So maybe I didn't have the humility necessary before my car accident to listen to an episode like this. Maybe the answers were all around me, but I wasn't looking. And I think there's truth to that. I really do. I don't think it's
Yeah.
a coincidence that I almost die in a car accident and I'm filled with regret, and then I find a book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. That's not a coincidence. It makes sense. My brain and body and central nervous system is looking for answers. And
Yeah.
someone who's actually humble, who's in pain, is always looking for answers. And I think that's what the benefit of humility really is. The problem is, in order to actually go and embark on courageous journeys, you need self-belief. And very rarely do self-belief and humility walk hand in hand. I had plenty of self-belief. My external achievement, competence, belief was super high. I felt like very capable. I always have felt very gifted and very capable, and I need to be very clear about that, because the people out there that do feel gifted and capable, you're probably a social coward like me and never want to say it or admit it. For people who don't feel gifted and capable, you probably secretly dislike certain people who everything comes easy to. And it's important for you to know that while you are capable of a lot, not everyone's capable of everything. Like, I'm not going to beat LeBron James at basketball. and no matter how hard I try, right? So genetic potential is a thing. However, we can all be better than we were yesterday. And I think that's really what matters, is you versus your potential, not you versus me, not me versus you. So when you talk about when did NLU come into the mix, Next Level University, and it's Next Level U, pun intended. So I talk about Alan 3.6. This is the iPhone 14, actually iPhone 14. I think the 15 is out now, but I always joke because in 2007 when I was a senior, the first iPhone came out. And Steve Jobs and Apple came out with the first iPhone, and it was a revolutionary breakthrough. However, compared to the iPhone 14, it would be a ripe piece of garbage in comparison. It wouldn't even be close. So hopefully, you, version 2.2, and me, version 3.6, is going to be infinitely, exponentially better, more effective, more capable than me 2.6 or me 1.6. And so we're all upgrading and evolving over time, hopefully by reflecting on our past and investing that in the now toward a bigger, better, brighter future. By the way, I have landscapers outside. I apologize if you can hear that. It is what it is. We're rolling with it. I'm spilling stuff. We got landscapers. We're out here doing it. So when did Next Level U come into the mix? Next Level U, next level version of yourself. Kevin and I started a podcast. So I had a podcast called Conversations Change Lives almost 8 years ago. Kevin was my first guest, my business partner, who apparently is coming on your show soon, I believe.
Yes. This will be if things go as planned, the episode after next week. So, yeah.
Nice. Okay,
Be
cool.
sure to check it out, everyone.
He's the yin to my yang, the yang to my yin, or whatever. We're business partners. And I'm also a business partner with my beautiful girlfriend, Emilia, as well. So it's just very cool what can happen when you partner up in business with the right people and then in intimate relationship with the right person. But anyways, so I had a podcast called Conversations Change Lives. He was my first guest. And he had a podcast called the Hyperconscious Podcast. Change the way you think, change the way you act, change the way you live.
Right.
And I was his first guest. And then eventually we just teamed up and we started the worst named podcast in history, which is the Conversations Change Lives meets Hyperconscious Podcast. And then eventually we went all in on Hyperconscious. Right. And then we were off to the races, and we rebranded to Next Level University, level up your health, wealth, life, and love, probably around episode 700 or so. And now we just crossed, actually earlier this morning, we recorded an episode. The average length of the episodes is about a half hour, and we just surpassed 1,850. So we just recorded 1,850 earlier today. I just uploaded that for our production team. And now we have a large company, Next Level University is the name of the company. nextleveluniverse.com is the website. But now we have Next Level U, and we have Podcast Growth University. We have Business Growth University that I'm starting. So Kevin's the podcast guy. I'm the business guy. Some podcasters want to start a business. Some business owners need a podcast. And then everyone needs to grow themselves. So it's grow yourself, grow your podcast, grow your business is kind of the deal. But that was all 8 years ago. And now we have a 19-person team. We're heard in over 175 countries now. And we actually are starting a group coaching program that's launching tonight. We already have the group filled. We've done 16 groups every quarter, and it's all podcasters for the first time. So this is very cool. But ultimately, the point of Next Level University is a place you go to learn how to reach your potential. Some of you want to reach your potential in growing yourself. Some people want to reach your potential in growing your podcast and your community. Some people want to reach their potential in growing their business and generating revenue. And honestly, all three of those are very important depending on whether or not you want a podcast. But at the end of the day, that's what we're about, which is growing yourself, because that's where everything starts. I think everything starts where I started at 14, which is taking personal responsibility for your own future, for your own next level. And I think we're all trying to get to that fourth bucket where we're both externally successful and internally fulfilled, and they feed each other rather than one at the expense of the other.
Right. And we've talked a little bit about, because there's a few things I want to touch upon that you mentioned, and we've talked about time quite a bit here. And it's really interesting, just the human mind and the concept of time, because I compare it to an accordion where, right, you took 36 years and condensed it down, right? But then if you were to stretch it out, it'd be 36 years, and you could even stretch out moments. So I've always compared time quite a bit to an accordion because it can seem so short and so long at the same time, right? I mean, yesterday could feel like yesterday or it could feel like 10 years ago. So it's very interesting and just looking back at some things. And I know in the military we used to say the days are long, but the weeks are short because every day felt like the longest day. And then next thing you know, it's like, oh, it's Sunday, the week's over. And of course, what your lifestyle impacts that significantly. You know, in the military, I talk about how for me personally, it felt like time was doubled. I was awake for longer hours than before. I was working weekends and holidays, rotating shift work. So every week felt like 2 weeks. You know, the more you sleep, the less you're awake, the quicker time goes by. But I bring that all up in relation to the mortality of life, right? Because you realized how fast life can end, how short life can be. And I think sometimes, caught up in so much stuff in the world that we feel like every day is forever, right? Some days feel really long and you're like, man, I can't believe I'm going to have so many more years of this. And then boom, those years are gone. And so, in relation to that, if you really want to get, ladies and gentlemen, without, crashing a car or doing anything crazy, a book I really recommend is the Book of Ecclesiastes. So, whether you're religious or not, this is a great book to read, regardless of you believe in God or not, whether you think he's the author or not. The Book of Ecclesiastes really talks about this guy who, supposedly is King Solomon, who just did it all. He had more money than anyone, more wisdom than anyone. He saw generations come and go. And in that book, he writes about how meaningless everything under the sun is. And it's a book that is how you interpret it. But I think one of the most important lessons you learn from it is just how short and temporary life is. And you can either be discouraged by that or encouraged by that. I think it's important to be encouraged, right? I mean, we've probably seen plenty of people who, like Mr. Lazarus here, could have gone into a depression for the rest of his time, saying, "Man, I almost died, and life is short. Life has no meaning. If I could die any day, right?" It's really how you take it. So, and one thing you mentioned is this conversation only is good for those who actually want to listen to it, in the sense of people who are willing to be humble and admit that. I think, especially with some of my mental health episodes on men's mental health, vulnerability, on some of the conversations about sexual intimacy, about social media, because there's so much denial. And a lot of times that denial comes from that third layer of ego, how we want people to perceive us, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, social media isn't controlling me. I'm not doom scrolling. I can stop when I want, right? Alcoholism, gambling, toxic relationships, all this stuff
Pornography.
stems from denial. Yeah, pornography is a great example. Denial of, that perception. And also, we don't want to believe that about ourselves. I think that second ego is so important because if
Mm-hmm.
we're addicted to something, well, we don't want to be an addict, not in the eyes of others or ourselves, because human beings love control. And if we're addicted to something or continually have a habit that is maybe not an addiction, but a habit that is taking over our life, I mean, we don't want to surrender control to that, right? We don't want people to think we have, and we don't want to acknowledge that we have. So I think it's important. And you talked about the flip side of it. You talk about deflation and people, you
Yeah.
know, not expressing themselves. And I think now more than ever, that's an issue, which I'm not going to get too political here, but with all the focus on race, right? There's a lot of shame towards, white people saying it's white privilege or it's this or that. And then you have on the other end this almost shame towards colored individuals saying like, hey, you can't do this because of this or you're held back because of this. And like you said, sure, there's some things that are just genetic, but there's plenty of things that aren't. And we're having these associations to shame people or idolize people, sometimes idolizing people who haven't achieved much, and then sometimes putting down people who have done great. And I've talked
Mm-hmm.
before on the show about diversity billets and how some companies, some colleges are using diversity billets not as a way to acknowledge something, but they are just accepting a candidate based solely on race or skin color rather than actual, qualifications. And I've heard people say it best, we don't care if the doctor or the pilot is white, black, gay, or whatever, as long as they can do the job. That's what's important.
Yeah.
because we're idolizing people, putting them up on a pedestal who aren't qualified. And I think the flip side to it, like you talked about, is shame. And maybe it's the other way. I know I talked about people saying white privilege this or silver spoon that, but on the other end, you have stereotypes where people who are colored are, maybe excelling in something and they're ashamed of it because it's associated with their race. You're only good at that because of that. So I think
Yeah.
that's always been an issue, but I think now more than ever with social media and the political agendas, that's just another layer of that, how other people perceive us, how we perceive ourselves. And that's on top of the self-esteem issues when it comes to all the beauty standards on, social media with women,
Yeah.
you know, certain body weights being better than others. In
And then
both sides, right?
all the filters as
Yeah,
well,
we've
and
well, we've talked
yeah,
also
and
just
then
about
AI with picture
yeah,
imaging and all that. Yep.
yeah, but also just the flip side, right? Because there's two sides to every story. Just also idolizing the fat is beautiful movement, therefore it's healthy, and then creating this concept of, you
Hmm.
know, beauty equals health and beauty equals money and all of this stuff. And I'll pass it back over to you to bounce any ideas off of that.
Well, I think ultimately you went down a very courageous road there, and I'm grateful for that because I think if we avoid uncomfortable conversations, I think we're in some serious trouble and
Yeah,
we're going to be very naive. And so I'm grateful that you're willing to face on a public medium some of the potential risks of sharing hard truths. So I gave up. I always joke. I say caffeine's my last remaining vice, and I never used to be courageous enough to share this stuff on public mediums. But I think it's important. I quit alcohol. I quit drugs. I quit pornography. It's been years. Uh, Alcohol was almost 6 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago. I used to count the days. I stopped counting
right,
because I do feel free of it, and I know I no longer will ever drink again. That's my personal choice. Even though it was hard at first, now I know it's good.
yeah,
But I used to count before, and then drugs and pornography and all that. It's been years and years and years. And what I will say is this: that rabbit hole of perception and the layers of the ego, and then the flip side of everything. Two things came to mind. One is personal responsibility. You have to be very careful and stand guard at the door of your mind. You have to be very careful of what you're listening to because there's constructive and destructive. Everything is constructive or destructive.
right,
Some people could say, well, alcohol helps me with social anxiety, so it's constructive. Okay. But binge drinking is destructive, right? So
yeah,
everything can be constructive or destructive. The question is, you have to put it into your own context and you have to take responsibility for your own life. So it's not my fault that my dad died when I was 2. It's not my fault my stepdad left when I was 14.
right,
But it is my responsibility to make a great life out of that because no one's going to come and save me. The only person that can help me build a bigger, better, brighter future is me. Now, does that guarantee I have a great future? No, I am up against certain things. I also have certain advantages, right? I can tell you some of my advantages. A lot of people see me and they see the awards in the background and they see the blonde hair and the blue eyes and they see, white Caucasian 6'2" American male. I understand that I have advantages. I do. These are my 3 advantages. Number 1, I am gifted. I'm very, 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 very intelligent. And you're not allowed to say that, but I've decided to be courageous enough to actually say it.
yeah,
I could party all night, not go to class, and still get straight A's in calculus. I was just that dude. Okay.
right,
Number 2 is I was born in a country that invests in powerful minds. I wouldn't have been able to go to one of the best engineering schools in the world, colleges in the world, if it wasn't for my Massachusetts and the U.S. giving me financial aid and scholarships.
right,
Okay. And yeah, I got straight A's in high school, and yeah, I earned those scholarships, but I'm very grateful. If I was born in another country that didn't have those privileges, I wouldn't be where I am today. Okay. I'm also in the biggest economy in the world. I know that. The U.S. is by far statistically the largest economy in the world. It's not close. Okay. The next closest is China, and you can look all this up. Now, the third advantage that I had is I had tons of self-belief. Is that because of the genetic potential? I don't know. Is it because I had a mom who taught me to aim high? Single mother? Maybe. The point is those are the 3 advantages that I have. I believed in myself at level 10 to a drastic extent, and I didn't know how much until later, but it's clear in hindsight. Number two, I was definitely very intellectually gifted. I still am. And number three, I was born in a country that invested in my brain and my
Right.
education.
Yeah.
And if I didn't have those three things, I wouldn't be where I am today. And I know that. However, what I want to make very clear is when people meet me and they see a silver spooner, it couldn't have been farther from the truth. And that's why when I open with my story, it's very important because I very easily could have been nothing. My business partner, Kevin, grew up in very humble beginnings as well. And we both didn't have dads. He didn't meet his dad till he was 27. My dad died at 2. We spend every Father's Day together. Now we have Next Level Hope Foundation where we host 2 events a year. One is it's for kids with single parents, and it was for boys without fathers, and we expanded it. But every Father's Day and every holiday, we rent out a YMCA and we make a traditionally sad time into a really playful time, and we get to be kids again, and it's awesome. And there's a bunch of kids, and we play basketball and soccer, and we eat pizza, and we have arts and crafts and stuff. It's awesome. But ultimately, the important piece of this is Kevin and I could have been nothing. We could have said life is meaningless and poor us, and we didn't have dads, and that's why we didn't make it. Instead of what we decided was, okay, I didn't have a dad, so I'm going to be the best dad. I don't know if he's going to be a father. I think he might adopt, but I'm going to be a father. And I'm not yet. Emilia and I are intending. And by intending, she's not pregnant yet or anything. But my point is that it's the meaning you associate. It's the beliefs.
Right.
It's the beliefs that you can be nihilistic and say, what's the point? And you can smoke cigarettes even though they kill you. Or you can become a health coach and try to do your best. And the health coach might die young and the cigarette smoker might live to 95. But statistically speaking, that's not the case. You also could win the lottery or you could die in a plane crash, even though most planes don't crash. So you got to look at the numbers. You got to look at the probability. I'm an engineer. I'm a numbers thinker. So in my head, it's the hand you're dealt. It's how you play it. And life is an infinite game, and it's a series of finite games within an infinite game. A finite game is I'm going to win this chess match. An infinite game is I'm going to become the best chess master that I can be. And so all of us are playing chess match after chess match after chess match, a bunch of finite games within an infinite game. And the point is we're all climbing a metaphorical mountain that gets higher as you climb it. There is no end state except for mortality. And do you want to, this is what I've come to. I want to be able to authentically say I gave all I had. I did all I could with all I had. And the truth is, at 26, when I got into that car accident, I couldn't say that. I couldn't say I did all I could with all I had, even though I had privileges and disadvantages. I couldn't say I did all I could with all I had. And now I can. I can say that now. And I'm living in a way that's aligned with that. And so I don't think people can be fulfilled internally without giving their all. We all have different potential. We all have different genetics. We all have different socioeconomic backgrounds. We all have different cultures and religions. We all have different countries. However, if you are doing all you can with all you have and you can authentically say that, I do believe you will be fulfilled. And that, I think, is what the world desperately needs, which is more fulfilled human beings.
I agree. And what you touched upon without saying it directly was that people just love to make excuses, to blame shift, because then we have this idea if it's not our fault, then we're a good person in other people's eyes, in our own eyes. So a great example is you could have, just continued to live a life that you weren't happy with and blame it on your father, blame it on your stepfather, and just continually blame them to make an excuse. Same with if someone is looking at your success and saying, well, it's because Mr. Lazarus is white or 6'2" or any of that. They're trying to excuse them of something that they can't control, right? Because they can control, how much effort they put into education, how much, they go to the gym, whatever it may be. But if it's something they can't control, they feel justified. Like, well, I can't do anything about it. And I think you said, it's so important to, if you get rid of all those excuses and anything you can blame, then you've done everything you can and you can have that fulfillment. So I think that's really important. And so we talked a bit about, we mentioned, your group coaching sessions, individual, business, podcast growth, all these different resources on your website. who should really check it out? Because when we say we're gonna help, get to the next level, I mean level of what and where and when, who exactly? Because we all have different levels we're trying to achieve, like I said in the beginning, and can encompass a lot of different things. And we heard some words like business and podcast, but we know that's not what it's limited to. So could you please explain that to us?
Absolutely, yeah. So, Next Level University is the brand and the business and the podcast, the main podcast, the 1850 episode one. And it's 1% improvement in your pocket from anywhere on the planet every single day, completely free. And I do believe that if you're out there and you have humility and you really do want to reach your potential, then nextleveluniverse.com is a place you'll find resources to do it. We have a book club. We do monthly meetups every month. We have group coaching every quarter. I do one-on-one coaching for business owners. Kevin does one-on-one coaching for podcasters. And then we have all kinds of stuff. We have a journal called the Next Level Dreamliner that helps you streamline towards your dreams and stay on point. And I did it this morning. Kevin uses it every morning too. It takes 7 minutes a day and you'll be way more productive. It starts with gratitude and then your most important tasks. And then it talks about your most important win from yesterday and your most important improvement from yesterday. And then your next level lesson is what we call it. You try to learn something new every day. And then there's a journal prompt in there too. But I'm ultimately not here to sell anything. What I'm here to do, if I'm going to sell anyone on anything, it's self-improvement, health, wealth, life, and love, holistic self-improvement. I don't want to be healthy and wealthy and not in love. I don't want to be in love and healthy and broke. I don't want to be at the top of the mountain unhealthy.
Right.
And to me, I've had so many mentors and coaches. I'm very grateful. And several of them have been multimillionaires and actually 1 billionaire. And some of them are really miserable human beings. Not all of them, but some of them are. And, some of them are divorced and some of them are unhappy and deeply unfulfilled and they lack purpose and meaning. And that's really what we're all after. We're all after purpose and meaning and passion and virtue. And we want our life to matter. And the way that your life matters is reach your potential, your unique potential, and help others do the same and grow and contribute and build a business that's meaningful. Because work sucks. It always has and it always will. People always say, well, you're a podcaster. You do what you love. If you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. That's some bullshit.
It's a lot of
is
work.
What that is. Yeah, it's a lot of work. I work 6 days a week, every week. I haven't taken a full day off in 9 freaking years. And that's okay. Like, the point of life is not to rest and relax. Rest and relax is, I call it R4, rest, relaxation, rejuvenation, and recharge. R4 is not the purpose of life. R4 is a necessity to reach your potential. I have to find my recharge. You have to recharge your iPhone. You have to recharge yourself too. But the point of the iPhone is not to charge it.
Right.
And I think a lot of people think life is about fun or life is about rest and relaxation. That's not true. And the people that I've met who have that belief system are deeply unfulfilled, usually. And they're going from boat to boat or party to party. And I've been guilty of that too. I get it. But really what matters is really reaching for it, really going for it. And Next Level University is for someone who has the humility to actually work on themselves and to grow themselves toward their true potential. I think that's, if that is you, please reach out and, check out the website.
Yeah, I agree. So to sum it up, you talked about gratitude, humility, and self-improvement, and really achieving that last one through the first two. And I think gratitude comes with humility because acknowledging and thanking people for some of the stuff in your life, it can be difficult, especially some of the worst stuff in your life. Asking for help is not easy. Especially there's a lot of, like we said, between our own egos and then all the barriers through social media, through mainstream media, through just the way humans interact with each other. There's a lot of barriers, but those barriers can be broken down by humility. And people think broken down is a negative thing, that humility is a negative thing. But pride and ego push away so much in your life. And so having the humility to appreciate others, appreciate what you have in your life, sets you up on a good path for that self-improvement. So ladies and gentlemen, you can find the website in the description below, the podcast, all of that. Mr. Lazarus, I do this at the end of every episode, but especially in the spirit of gratitude, appreciate you coming on the show and all the people you work with and what you do. And I thank you for coming on.
It has been a genuine pleasure. I started with gratitude. I want to end with gratitude. And while I have to go to the bathroom desperately, I enjoyed every second of this. Keep doing what you're doing, my friend, and keep spreading awareness. I think awareness is a great thing.
Sailing through the ocean blue, nuclear reactors my crew, guiding the ship, the stars as our guide, through the waves we ride. Jokes and laughter fill the air, on this voyage we have to share, working together, side by side, as one family we will abide. In the heart of the ship we reside, nuclear operators with pride, powering the vessel with every stride. Our mission, a source of great pride.